Hello you all, and welcome back to Living Unveiled with Maddie. As we bring this series to a close, something interesting has been happening quietly behind the scenes. Since the earlier messages in this series were released, several people have reached out privately to talk about what we discussed, especially the idea of the little foxes. I do honestly wish some of these conversations could happen openly on the channel because they do reveal something very real about marriage. That many of the struggles people experience are not the dramatic betrayals or the catastrophic failures. They are the tiny things, the small irritation, the small habits, the small misunderstandings that keep repeating the cycles. One conversation made that very clear. A woman shared that in her marriage, one of those foxes was something very ordinary: domestic chores. Who was doing what? Who felt they were carrying the heavier load? Who felt their efforts went unnoticed? At first, this all seemed small, just a few disagreements here and there, but the same argument kept returning and repeating itself. The same frustrations, the same feeling of not being heard. And over time, the tone of these conversations changed. What began as irritation became resentment. Words became sharper. The atmosphere in the home grew tense. Eventually, she said the marriage had become toxic. The constant quarrels drained the warmth out of the relationship. And in the end, they divorced. Now, when she reflected on what had happened, she said something that was very sobering. She said, maybe things would have been different if I had known then what I understand now after listening to the podcast. And that sentence says a lot, because most marriages are not destroyed by one catastrophic moment. They are worn down by the small things that quietly accumulate. A careless tone, a sarcastic comment, an expectation that is never spoken clearly, a habit that slowly communicates you're on your own here. Marriage has a way of bringing those places into the light, not loudly, just gradually. The impatience we thought we had under control, the pride that resists apologizing first, the quiet expectation that life should bend in our own direction. Marriage does not create these things. What it does is it simply reveals them. Two lives come close enough together and suddenly the real person appears. The person who gets tired easily, the person who sometimes wants to win the argument more than resolve it. The person who promises patience and then discovers that patience is harder late at night when both people are exhausted and someone forgot to take out the trash again. Now, if you have been married long enough, you recognize the moments. You walk into the room, notice something that was supposed to be done but wasn't, and that little internal conversation begins. Should I say something or should I just let it go? Sometimes you say something and sometimes you just let it go. Sometimes you say something and later you realize you probably should have let it go. Marriage brings those moments to the surface, not because marriage is flawed, but because closeness reveals the true self, and that revelation can feel uncomfortable. But it is also deeply important to note, as stated earlier, that marriage is not only companionship. Marriage is formation. It becomes one of the places where the self begins to encounter something it naturally resists: the call to die. Not physical death, but death to the version of ourselves that insists on being first. Scripture describes this transformation in Colossians 3:12-13. It said, put on then compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, forgiving each other as the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive. Those words sound beautiful when we read them slowly. Compassion, kindness, patience, forgiveness. But anyone who has lived inside a real relationship knows that those qualities rarely grow in quiet, comfortable circumstances. They tend to emerge when something stings, when expectations collide, when the easier reaction would be to withdraw, defend yourself, or let irritation take over. Yet, love chooses grace instead. And that's where those virtues become real. Not as ideas, but as choices. Because marriage places two imperfect people close enough together that love cannot remain theoretical. It must be practiced. Patience must be chosen. Forgiveness must be extended. Humility must show up in ordinary conversations. And slowly, over time, something begins to change. Love becomes less fragile, less dependent on moods, less dependent on circumstances. It becomes steadier, stronger, more like a covenant. And that's where the deeper meaning of marriage begins to emerge. Marriage was never meant to be the final destination of human love. It is a sign, a reflection, a glimpse of something greater. The prophet spoke about God's relationship with his people using the language of covenant love. In Hosea 2:19, God says, I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you in righteousness and in justice, in steadfast love and in mercy. Note those words. Steadfast love, not fragile love or temporal affection, but steadfast love. Marriage becomes one of the places where we begin to understand what that kind of love looks like. The kind of love that stays, the kind of love that forgives again and again and again, the kind of love that remains faithful even when life becomes inconvenient. But marriage cannot carry the full weight of a heart because the deepest hunger of the human soul was never meant to be satisfied by another person. Even the best spouse cannot carry that burden. The psalmist says in Psalm 73 verse 25 to 26, he said, whom have I in heaven but you? And there's nothing on earth that I desire beside you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. That longing points beyond human relationships. It reminds us that marriage is not the destination. It is only a preparation for a greater union, which means the patience we practice now, the forgiveness we extend now, the quiet decisions to remain faithful when emotions fluctuate, and all these moments are shaping something deeper inside us. They are teaching the heart the language of covenants, and one day the process of formation will be complete. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 15:53 to 54, he said, for this perishable body must put on the imperishable, and this mortal must put on immortality. Then shall come to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. The impatience we wrestle with now, the pride we are learning to surrender, the broken instincts still being refined, all of it belongs to what scripture calls the corruptible nature. And the corruptible cannot inherit what God is preparing. Which means the life we're living now is not simply about getting through the years. It is about being formed. Marriage becomes one of the classrooms where that formation takes place. Where love becomes less sentimental and more steadfast. Where loyalty grows stronger than convenience. Where two people slowly learn what it means to remain faithful. And then scripture gives us the final picture. Not merely a throne, a wedding. In Revelation 19:7-9 we read, let us rejoice and be glad and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come and his bride has made herself ready. Blessed are those who who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb, a bride prepared. And that word deserves our attention. Prepared, not rushed, accidental, assumed, but prepared. Because prepare is a verb. It's a doing word, an intentional word, a word that suggests decision, deliberateness, readiness that did not happen by chance. To prepare means you understand that something important is coming and you begin to adjust your life in the light of it. You do not prepare casually, you prepare on purpose. You prepare because what is ahead matters enough to shape what you do now. And that is what makes this so deep. Scripture does not say the bride simply appeared. It says the bride made herself ready, which means readiness is not passive. There is participation in it. There is surrender in it. There is a yielding to the work of God that says, remove from me what cannot remain. Refine in me what must be made pure. Teach me now what I will need then. That is what earthly covenant begins to train us in. Because every time we choose patience over irritation, we are preparing. Every time we choose humility over pride, we are preparing. And every time we choose faithfulness over convenience, we are also preparing. Every time we choose to confront the little selfish instincts that make love harder, we are preparing. And suddenly, marriage becomes more than companionship. It becomes rehearsal with eternity in view. Understand, again, that marriage is not simply about finding someone to share your life with. It's a place where the soul learns covenant, a place where self is slowly surrendered, patience is prepared, and love becomes stronger than convenience. And every act of faithful love practiced here is quietly preparing the hearts for the day when the bride finally meets the bridegroom. So let me leave you with a question that requires honesty. What little fox are you allowing to grow bold in your marriage? Is it the harsh tone that comes after a stressful day at work? Well, personally, I'm still learning. Is it silence that replaces communication? Is it pride that refuses to apologize first? Is it irritation over small domestic responsibilities that has slowly turned into disrespect? Whatever it is, do not dismiss it because it started small. Small things don't grow. So catch that little fox early. Confront it with humility and choose covenant again. Because every time we choose love over pride, grace over irritation, and faithfulness over convenience, we are preparing our hearts for the day when the bridegroom comes and the rehearsal finally becomes the wedding. Until next time, stay unveiled.